Welcome to news. Today, the patriarchy continues to silence and ignore women as doctors who can't find the clitoris themselves continue to chop it off. I'm Savannah Montana, and this is the Weekend Update. We will now go to our field reporter, Cleo Torres, who is taking to the streets of Baltimore to uncover the true absence of women's sexual health knowledge in the real world. Cleo?
Hi, I have a question. Do you know where the clitoris is?
Excuse me, sir. Do you know where the clitoris is?
Canada.
And while I wish that video was scripted, unfortunately for all of us, it was not. However, while the clitoris is not in Canada, the benchmark for comprehensive and correct women's sexual health education is. With more on that, Virginia is for us.
Thank you, Savannah. And I agree that Canada is a bit of a reach, but the country does seem like a good model for the United States. Let's get into it. When it comes to Canadian medical school, topics such as violence against women, medical conditions among women, and female dysfunctions were taught in more than 80% of programs. Compare that to the United States, with only 50% of medical schools including similar teachings. To add, Canada has a constitutional right to abortion, with high access to such a procedure because of their universal health coverage. However, in the United States, rights vary by state, and there are high barriers to access with 2-visit mandates, required ultrasounds, and biased information. Although the United States political landscape is foundationally different from Canada, we can take a lesson or two from this neighboring country. However, this does shed light on the problem regarding women's health in the United States. American women face high rates of negative health outcomes and traumatic medical experiences because of issues with innate biases and lack of adequate research, education, and physician training. The female body and birthing are central to humanity and our history. However, societal misconceptions and values have molded how we deliver information about the female body, and specifically within reproductive health. This problem does not only affect patients, but providers, educators, researchers, and policymakers are all stakeholders that have needs within this field. Taking a look into patient options, there are OBGYNs, prenatal education, and Planned Parenthood. OBGYNs administer fetal monitoring tests, perform prenatal testing, and screen for a variety of genetic disorders. They also include fertility doctors who specialize in hormonal function and reproductive health. They're considered an authority on women's health and a great option for ensuring a healthy pregnancy and child. However, there is a growing shortage, and there has been a trend of these doctors pursuing higher paying specialties, such as fertility or critical care. Prenatal education includes classes and lessons to teach women about the stages of their pregnancy and possible complications. These classes have shown to significantly improve mental health, decision-making, and lifestyle habits while pregnant. But these classes are rarely taught by doctors, limiting the comprehensive medical information transferred to women. Planned Parenthood is a nationwide network of federally funded reproductive health and sex education clinics. This foundation offers a variety of testing, procedures, and education with the goal of affordability and accessibility. However, it has been politicized, causing a lack of funding, which directly affects the quality of care provided. In addition, Planned Parenthood does not provide the patient-doctor relationship of an OBGYN or a PCP, which affects the adherence and trust of a patient. Shifting to women's health and medicine, it's important to consider medical schools and continued education. As we took a look into medical schools nationwide, it's evident that there are a limited number of women's health focuses or programs. There is also a noticeable lack of data within this topic since the early 2000s. Although the U.S. is highly ranked for OBGYN programs, the numbers still suggest that women's health is seen as a specialty focus instead of a central topic that involves half of the population. Continued medical education, or CME, requires physicians to maintain and improve medical knowledge and skills as their field advances. This is a great method of teaching physicians new and improved methods of treatment or care, but doctors are not required to learn across different disciplines, gynecology being one of them. The last approach is through women's health regulation. We see through sex education in schools, if taught correctly, sex education can help instill a healthy understanding of sex, relationships, and anatomy from a young age. However, we see states regulating or creating their own sex ed curriculum, making the quality vary by state. Political, religious, and cultural influences all play into the subjective sex education that we see in America. With all of this, it's evident that stakeholders continue to face unmet needs. Patients need improved education of the female body, spaces to share and destigmatize female experiences, and accessible programs that expand the knowledge of women's health. Providers need comprehensive education and training of women's health to deliver the highest standard of care. Researchers need financial support, such as funding and grants, to conduct reliable research that promotes women's health. Educators need appropriate compensation as well as accurate information to objectively inform students and peers about women's health. And policymakers need accurate information and data regarding women's health to help revise policy and better the communities that are most in need. To improve upon the current state of women's health, we need a pathway to 1. Improve medical school and current provider education, 2. Highlight the importance of research and financing in the area of women's health, and 3. Create programs that promote safe spaces for women.
Back to you, Savannah.
Thank you, Virginia. Here with me is our first guest, Dr. Taint, an OBGYN and adjunct professor at D&B Hospital. Dr. Taint, thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for having me on, Savannah. Big fan.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Taint, we brought you here today to discuss the inadequacies within OBGYN training and education. Any thoughts on this?
What inadequacies? Out at D&B Health Systems.
Perfect. Well, do you think, based on your experiences, that physicians in your field receive adequate and equivalent training?
In my experience, we all go to medical schools and our doctors are doctors who study medicine and not journalism.
Were you taught how to do an abortion in med school?
No, this isn't Canada.
Right. And since I am getting incredibly tired of this man's presence, final question. How often do you complete continuous medical education for obstetrics and gynecology?
We are not required to do that, but I feel like you knew that. We gonna get to the book deal today?
We will not. When we get back from a quick break, we will move on to, since we can, we will move on to talking with an activist in this field, Jessica Pinn. Thank you so much, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. In case you're just joining us, my name is Savannah Montana with the Weekend Update for News. In contrast to our last guest, next we'll be interviewing Jessica Pinn, an advocate attempting to correct and ensure complete anatomy of the clitoris in medical textbooks and curricula. At 18, Pinn believes while undergoing a labiaplasty, the dorsal nerves of her clitoris were unintentionally cut. Following this experience, Pinn began to research inconsistencies in medical education on female genitalia. She found the sexual function of the labia minora was infrequently described, and clitoral anatomy was inaccurate or inadequate. With more on this, we will go to our field reporter, Clea Torres, for her interview with Pinn.
Thanks, Savannah. Hi, Jessica. We understand that you underwent a labiaplasty, which then left you with diminished feeling. What do you think is a main and continuing problem with plastic and OBGYN surgeons setting standards for these types of procedures?
My argument is that labiaplasty surgeons create the demand for labiaplasty. Personally, I had no insecurities until I stumbled upon what surgeons were saying about labia minora online, and that's what convinced me that I had a problem. And I also read peer-reviewed medical literature, and it didn't occur to me that doctors would publish blatant misinformation supported by no evidence at all in medical journals. So, I believed it. I made decisions based on lies. So I went over that. I went over all the misinformation that I would argue coerced my consent. I went over how, there was a lack of, accurate information on risks. And then, I went over how the anatomy doesn't get taught to doctors, how there are no training standards, causes of that, like societal causes of that. What I think is what was get neglected because of at least the historical suppression. I think there's a cultural suppression of female sexuality.
So it sounds like the information is incredibly outdated and wrong. What do you think are the barriers to changing teachings to portray correct anatomy and inclusive sexual information within medical schools?
There is willful blindness. There's a lack of interest. There's a lack of dissemination. There's a refusal to teach it. Like not one of the top 20 OBGYN programs will agree to teach clitoral anatomy. One thing that could be done is OBGYN residents at residency programs could say, hey, could you please teach this to us? Or medical students, trying to match with OBGYN programs could show preference for OBGYN programs that cover it. Or, the other thing is, now, I would like it to get taught in medical school.
It really sounds like there's just a lack of interest in correcting misteachings in medical schools and residencies. The activism you are doing is amazing, and thank you so much for coming to speak with us today. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Cleo. Now that we are all well versed on the shortcomings of current women's sexual health education, we would like to turn your attention to someone who is trying to change this field for the better. Cleo also had the opportunity to sit down this week with Connie Langus, the founder, president, and CEO of New Beginnings, a nonprofit organization aiming to reform education, improve available community women's health resources, fund and increase research in this area, and make an impact at the policy level.
Thanks, Savannah. I'm here at New Beginnings with Connie Langus. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. We're really excited to share what we do here.
So you and New Beginnings sound like you're doing some amazing work. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about who you are and what you guys are hoping to achieve?
Sure. So New Beginnings is a nonprofit organization working to amend and expand the education of women's health. And that's including their sexual health, accuracy of education, as well as pre- and postnatal care.
Incredible. So what are some immediate changes you guys would like to see in women's health care?
Well, first and foremost, we'd like to adjust medical textbooks to include medically accurate female genitalia that is representative of all genders and races. This is because women of color are often not included in medical textbooks, but many are predisposed to increased complications not present in the white female population. We also need to make sure that there is comprehensive pregnancy and abortion education to future physicians. All this information also must be implemented and required in CME training for current and future physicians.
Oh, those are all really important. Tell me a little bit about your team. I'm sure with such a wide range of goals and expectations, it can be very difficult to manage.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're made up of a volunteer board of directors consisting of women health educators, researchers, doctors, and advocates. Our wonderful executive director supervises our divisions, and since we regularly hold workshops and educational programs, our program director coordinates our activities and plans our fundraising events. We're largely a company of volunteers, so we have a volunteer director that recruits, hires, trains, and manages our personnel to make sure that we're all working towards our goal.
Incredible. So beyond events and community outreach, what is New Beginnings doing to truly change the way women's health care is going to be delivered?
Sure, so we are advocating and appealing the AAMC and the LCME, which are the deciding organizations for what is taught in medical schools. We'll also focus on the American Board of Gynecology and Obstetrics to reform current teachings of both medical students and physicians. We would also like to work with Planned Parenthood and experts in the OBGYN field to create workshops and forums for women preparing to be pregnant or currently pregnant or were recently pregnant. We're lobbying to local and state officials to not only protect current healthcare laws, but to work to vote to solidify protections of sexual education over abstinence for adolescents and supporting the Women's Health Protection Act.
Wow. So that's such impressive outreach at so many levels. Can you maybe tell us a little bit how that works at a nonprofit?
Sure, so we're actually a 501c3 organization, which is a nonprofit organization. It is our direct service arm and is specifically focused on education, research, and outreach. In order to maintain our goal of advocacy, we'll need to maintain a separate arm that's classified as a 501c4, and that arm is specifically going to focus on policy and making change happen at higher levels. Our advocacy arm receives donations, state and local grants, and direct revenue, while our direct service arm is able to receive tax-deductible donations from the state, local, and federal grants, direct revenue, as well as revenue from payments by medical schools and organizations for our research and publications.
Oh, thank you. So tell us, Connie, what does the future of women's health look like with New Beginning at the helm?
Sure, so we expect to see shifts in societal and medical biases an increase in patient knowledge, both of which will lead to better health outcomes for women. We will see accurate and thorough research and literature on female anatomy, and we expect that medical technology and treatments will adapt to all of this new knowledge and innovative solutions that we are providing. We see women expressing themselves and understanding their bodies and knowing how to advocate for themselves in medical situations. We want to see a society without fear of misinformation and miseducation.
I just want to give one last thanks to New Beginnings and Connie for having me here. It sounds like their company is really going to make great strides for women's sexual health as well as sexual health competency for both physicians and everyday Americans. Back to you in the studio, Savannah.
After a trying day here in the studio, New Beginnings has restored a small portion of my faith in humanity and a newfound hope that anyone, seriously anyone, can find the clitoris in this country. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I am your host, Savannah Montana. This is the Weekend Update for News. Please come again.